Hello. Thanks so much for listening and joining this session. I'm Martha King, Arts Programme Manager at Knowle Media Centre in Bristol, UK. And I'm here with Krista.
Hi there, I'm so sorry there's a dog barking, but I'm Krista Nightingale, the Executive Director of the Better Block.
Okay, pass to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm Production and Workshop Manager here at The Factory, part of Knowle Media Centre with Martha in Bristol as well.
And Knowle Media Centre and Better Block have been so lucky to have begun an exchange thanks to one of the Co-Creating Change International Commissions. This commission has given us the rare opportunity to have a dialogue between two international organisations and communities, with emphasis on being inspired and learning from each other rather than outcomes. We're so grateful for this opportunity and would like to thank Co-Creating Change for this. So we at Knowle Media Centre reached out to Better Block as we were really inspired by their practice and felt there are lots of links with what we're doing in Knowle West and at Knowle Media Centre, especially in relation to placemaking and using digital fabrication as a democratic tool for tangible social change. So before we talk about what we've been doing together so far, we thought we'd share a little bit about each of our organisations and then explain a bit about what we'd like to do together next. And we'll try to leave some time at the end for questions too. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen and tell you a little overview of Knowle Media Centre. So just bear with me while I bring that up. Okay, hopefully you can see that there. So a little overview of Knowle Media Centre. We are a socially engaged arts and digital organisation who've been based in Knowle West, Bristol, since 1996. On the slide, you can see an image of our two buildings. On the left there is an eco straw bale building where we have various different training rooms and sound recording studios, etc. And on the right is our digital fabrication makerspace, which we'll tell you more about in a bit. So to give a bit more of context of Knowle West, it is an area on the edge of South Bristol, built in the interwar period on a garden city principle, often defined as a predominantly working class neighbourhood that ranks highly on government deprivation indices. But I should change the slide. But whilst the socio-economic injustices that people face are very real, it is a strong community with rich in culture and heritage, with a history of, as you can see in these pictures, street parades, an amazing local market, and various different kind of growing projects and other amazing charities. But there aren't as many shops and services as there should be, and people want to see visible improvements to their streets and public spaces. People are sick of ongoing consultation and want the council and the increasing amount of developers who are proposing to build houses on lots of green spaces in Knowle West to take more notice of the really good neighbourhood plans and working groups and regeneration frameworks, and also a public art strategy that exists and that were co-designed with community over the past decade and more. These plans clearly state some of the needs and hopes for the future of the area, but they don't always feel like they are, or they just simply aren't always being listened to. So Knowle Media Centre is an organisation that's rooted in Knowle West. It has grown with and in the community. Placemaking and social change are at the heart of everything we do. In fact, the whole project grew from co-creation. Its current building was co-designed with local people who wanted more space to engage creatively with technologies after Knowle Media Centre had began as a photographic project out the back of a health centre. So this picture there is actually one of the designs from the local people of how they might have imagined the centre to look. And as you saw from the first slide, it didn't turn out quite like that, but nice to see where it came from. So our programmes now range from creative social action projects with young people. there we go, to arts-led community workshops and gatherings that help demystify technologies and shift power in terms of who has the skills to understand, code, make, and hack the tech that we often feel controls us or makes decisions on our behalf. We always start with people and use art and tech to help co-create and make better futures together. One of the most important digital tools we draw on, as does Better Block, is digital fabrication, which includes things like CNC machines, laser cutters, etc. We believe that these technologies can give communities affordable ways to make tangible change in the neighbourhood. And as I mentioned, we have a makerspace called The Factory and a citizen-led housing project called We Can Make that has grown into its own community interest company. And I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to just tell you a little bit more about these projects because they feel really relevant in relation to our collaboration with Better Block.
Thanks very much, Martha. And just bring my set of slides up. Bear with me just one second. So hopefully, yeah, brilliant. So yeah, as Martha says, we have another building called The Factory, which is also part of Knowle West Media Centre. It's just about half a mile away from the main building. And we saw an image of the front of The Factory on Martha's first slide. Here I've got a couple of cross sections, which you can't tell a huge amount of detail from, but to be honest, we're just coming to the end of a redevelopment period, so not the most photogenic of spaces right this second, hence the computer generated images. But we have a number of different pieces of digital fabrication equipment here in our space, spread across 4 distinct workshops: textiles and print workshop, laser and fabrication, prototyping, which is a bit of a catch-all for some of our more niche technologies, and woodwork. These range from traditional woodworking tools, bandsaw, power saw, belt sanders, etc. Large format CNC router, which we implement a lot on the sort of examples that we'll be showing here, and an awful lot of parallel with Better Block in their approach. We've got laser cutters, 3D printers, and we've also been working with our waste streams a lot recently, so recycling our waste acrylic from our laser cutters, shredding those, processing them down and pressing them back into new acrylic sheets so we can reduce the waste that we generate and also create some new interesting materials and really nice colorways to work with. We've also got a co-working space in development on the ground floor of our buildings, and a studio, so we can allow both members and staff to find a space to work, collaborate and create in whatever way suits them best. The way that we describe what we do at the factory is broadly categorized into 3 areas. So we connect. We build a diverse community around a growing membership base of creatives, makers and innovators across the city with a focus on South Bristol. We hold Inspire talks from a wide variety of specialists in different creative practices. We collaborate on research projects where technologies and communities meet, working with academics, specialists and members of the community. And we build relationships and partnerships with individuals and organizations across Bristol and the Southwest. We also develop. We develop skills, ideas, confidence and enterprise opportunities for our members and the wider public through a series of training programs for 2D and 3D design and for digital fabrication tools themselves, using a variety of different pieces of kit and different materials. We provide enterprise support to pre-start and small businesses, helping them to get the support they need and experiment with technologies that they may not be able to afford or might not know what they need to commit to without playing the field a little bit with different pieces of equipment. And we provide inductions in both software and digital fabrication equipment, so our members can come in and use a laser cutter or a 3D printer by the hour. We also provide volunteering opportunities where we're able to, and have worked with a wide range of really experienced and incredibly talented volunteers over the last few years. And the last word we use to describe ourselves or to describe what we do is creating. Creating and making is at the core of everything that we do. We like to enable members, organizations and individuals to create products, businesses, prototypes and experiences. provide access to members to all of the tools that we have here. As we said before, focusing on digital fabrication. We create a rapid prototyping environment, and we encourage fast failure and quick iterations. And we also undertake a wide range of commissions ourselves, from simple instruct and cut jobs, making shelves or other simple pieces of wood, through to more complex design and fabricate projects, which we'll come on to a little bit as we start talking about We Can Make. Before I go there, though, it's worth talking a little bit about our practice and our approach here at the factory. We aim to put people first, so that's putting people before technology, encouraging collaboration, working closely with our clients and our partners. We aim to learn through making physical and tangible objects to test ideas quickly, gauge user experience and develop individual skills. We want to create an open environment to all, so a low floor entry to the space, people of all abilities and all backgrounds. Create a sense of fun, experimentation and play, with co-design at the heart of what we do, and rapid prototyping, testing things out quickly. And we like to embrace failure. It's okay to fail, as this is how you learn. We're not afraid to try things out, and we try to preach that to our customers and our members as well. All the time, we strive to be sustainable, working towards a greener and more efficient working practice and sustainable material usage for ourselves, and offer consultancy and support to our members and their small businesses who are looking to undertake these journeys themselves. I pulled out one example of co-creation and co-design here at the factory, as it's the most recent in memory and that it's still ongoing. What we've been doing through the course of 2021 is working with a group of about 15 of our members to design and then fabricate the furniture and some of the interior pieces of the factory. I mentioned at the start of my slot that we've been going through some renovation and creating these new workshops. And so as a result, we've got a lot of furniture to make, and we wanted to make sure that the spaces themselves were focused on what our members needed rather than what we thought that they needed. The first few sessions of this were held online. On the top left of this slide, there's a Miro board there. So that's an online sort of collaborative whiteboard, which we use to map out our members' usage of the space, what their needs are and their ideas are for areas where improvements could be made. Members split up into groups, each tackling a design brief that came out of this first session of needs, ranging from workbenches and display tables to areas for route mapping or signposting around the spaces, and collaborative build-it-yourself stools to bring a little bit of fun to the start of a workshop and a bit of a challenge from the seating alone. Once our COVID-19 restrictions eased during this summer, we were then able to start holding some in-person rapid prototyping sessions. So working with cardboard, we've got an image on the right-hand side there of a sort of welcome monolith that was quickly and delightfully created using old bits of cardboard and cardboard tube, etc. And then since then, we've been moving on to proper digital designs of these bits of furniture, and they're now in place being tested. We've got 3 different pieces of kit or bits of furniture at the moment that are being tested by our staff and members, gaining feedback all the way, and then with more to come to fill our space out before the end of this year. So that's the factory. I'm now going to stop presenting and then re-present again, put a slightly different hat on as my We Can Make hat. Unfortunately, one of the We Can Make team couldn't be with us today, but I tend to do a little bit of moonlighting with a foot in both camps, to be honest, as the connections between We Can Make and the factory are very strong, as hopefully will come through. Fairly self-explanatory in these few slides. So We Can Make is a community-led housing project. It's a way to make affordable homes which are good for people, neighbourhood and planet. Over the last 3 years, we've worked with local people, designers, artists and policymakers to explore new ideas and test out different approaches. And together, we've co-created a working prototype of how to do housing differently. One of the prototypes that has helped us on this journey was the Making Together project. This project started in 2020 We worked with a wonderful crew of local people, aged 16 to 76, from many different backgrounds: trades, architects, artists, gardeners, young mums. We met every Friday for the first, or every other Friday, sorry, for 3 months through the deepest part of lockdown here in the UK, co-designing and then physically building a pavilion situated outside our main building, affectionately known as Block West. We can see part of the finished article down in the bottom right-hand corner there. This is a sort of architectural structure that has been fabricated from 150 or 154 blocks, I think it is. If you look closely at the image, you should be able to see that the structure there is made from a series of discrete and identical building blocks from our partners called Automated Architecture, and this is their building system. So all of those blocks were fabricated here within the factory. So we cut the plywood, cut all the parts down. They were then transported to our main building where the cohort, so you can see some of their faces in the other images above, moved from the online and the design sort of ideation phase of what we was going to build. And then finally in the summer, when restrictions allowed it, they got their hands on. They built all of these blocks from parts, varnished them, painted them, and assembled them all together. And managed to see this process from beginning to end. A number of key elements enabled this unique and supportive space to flourish. We aim to create a non-hierarchical space where we valued all know-how, with every voice heard and no fixed outcome. We gave permission to explore and learn together. Everyone was paid the same flat rate for their participation. We got physical prototyping kits out to everybody. This was particularly important during the first lockdown of 2020 and ensured that all participants could access resources and not everything was done in front of a screen. We employed a buddy system to ensure there was always someone to engage with on a more individual level rather than having to engage with the whole group if that's what was preferred. And we encouraged all our crew to focus on what values we see in our neighbourhood and what we see to be missing. And there's a nice quote there from John, one of our Making Together cohort, and actually one of the residents of our future real homes that we're building. So at the core of We Can Make Housing is our design code, where the community sets the rules for what gets built. This makes it easier for people to navigate a complicated planning system, ensures homes are high quality, and that the development adds character to the neighbourhood. We're now on the 3rd edition of the We Can Make Community Design Code. The creation of the code has been highly participative, engaging deeply and broadly with local residents and stakeholders through co-design sessions, artist residencies, inspiration study trips, and an exhibition. Overall, and this is a screenshot of a couple of pages of the design code, overall the design code aims to make it easier to produce innovative, high quality, policy compliant home designs that meet the aspirations of those in housing need and the wider community. Each new home should positively contribute to the character of the neighbourhood with social and environmental value built into the design process and outcomes. This co-design approach is integral to all elements of We Can Make to ensure that the values, ideas and interests of each future resident shape their own specific home as well. So this is as true for the internal layout and finish of the home itself as it is for the bin and bike store, garden furniture, hedgehog house and bird house that goes within the garden. We've been running a number of co-design sessions in person and online where required with these future residents, with fabricators, with gardeners, local community members, all engaged in every step of the process. And here we are, making real houses for real people, designed by them, and for the community. Excitingly, we're now on site with our first 2 homes with a growing pipeline to follow on from here. That's about everything from me now, so I'm going to stop presenting and hand over to Krista, I believe.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. That's amazing work. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I do apologize for the dog barking earlier. Her name is Riva, and she just wanted to make sure you knew that she was here. So I think she accomplished that goal. All right, perfect. Well, my name is Krista Nightingale, and I am the Executive Director of the Better Block, which is an urban design nonprofit that is based out of Dallas, Texas, in the US. We started our work about 11 years ago when our founding director, Jason, walked onto this street here in Dallas, and he and his neighbors said, what could we do to make this street better? Basically, they just wanted to add flowers, they wanted to add cafe seating, and just create a space for people to come together. But they quickly learned that there were ordinances from the 40s prohibiting most of these things from happening. For example, it was $1,000 to add flowers. It was area times market value times 85% times 12% to add street cafes. And there was an ordinance from 1941 that said it was illegal for people to gather on a sidewalk. So if you want to kill street life, this is pretty much what you can do. So Jason and his friends took a look at this and they said, well, this seems ridiculous. They were aware of this new, at the time, concept called tactical urbanism, where community members were kind of just going out and making the changes that they wanted to see and demonstrating them for a short period of time. So they decided to apply that approach here. They painted bike lanes with kids paint and duct tape, knowing that they could erase it quickly if they needed to. They rented some old street lighting. They created cafe seating. They had some friends who wanted to do pop-up businesses, and they invited them to pop up and test out their concepts in some vacant storefronts for the weekend. And all those ordinances that they were breaking, they printed those off and they posted them in the windows. And they invited city staff to come take a look. They weren't sure what was going to happen, but city staff said, you know what, you're right. Some of this just does not make sense. And over time, they worked to lower some of those fees and change some of those ordinances. So Jason and his friends realized that there was a lot of value to this grassroots approach and to communities kind of going out and seeing what the changes could be and making it happen in days rather than decades. So they created recipes, they put those online, they open sourced a lot of the concepts, and that allowed the concept of the Better Block to spread around the country and around the world. So we are in this old car garage in the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas. It is one part staff kind of office space and one part workshop and creator space, which you all have already heard about a CNC router, but we'll talk a little bit more about how we use that. But basically what we do is we work with neighborhoods and alongside neighbors to look at spaces like this that are pretty cold, that are not built to human scale, meaning that they are not a space where we would necessarily want to hang out. And most of the spaces that we're working on, especially here in America, were built with the car in mind first and the people second. So we'll work alongside community members through a 120-day process, and we'll identify what it is they'd like to see in the area. We'll come up with some ideas and some designs, and then we'll work with local fabricators and local artists and local volunteers to turn the space into something like this. An area where you would want to go, where the priority is more on you and then the vehicles, and that allows for vending and a different land use with the area. Here in America, we're asked a lot to look at our shopping centers that are failing and kind of rethink what these spaces may be. They are quite large, and so it's very hard to kind of retrofit this in the matter of a couple days. But we always start with listening to the community and saying, what is it that you would like to see in this space? A lot of the communities we work with are over-surveyed and under-delivered on, and we will not do that. So if we are going to ask you what you would like to see, we know that we will be able to follow it up with some sort of action demonstrating what the space could be. In this particular instance, it went from this parking lot to more of a sports kind of focused for kids to be in the area. We also look at the streets and how do we slow those down? How do we rethink the space and reconfigure the space? And a lot of times what we're looking at is how do you continue to allow some traffic in the area, but by shifting the priority from the car to the person, can we make it safer for everyone involved? As our ultimate goal is to create more walkable neighborhoods that the community can use together. And in this particular case, our approach was a little more focused on safety overall, as there's a school up here in the left-hand corner where there are 180 languages spoken. And most of the kids are walking through this horribly designed 5-point intersection, and they're walking to apartment buildings over in these areas. This is one of the higher crime spots in the city of Dallas. And so the goal was, one, how do you not only make it safer from a walkability standpoint, but how do you just make it safer in general as it relates to crime? And this is what we turned it into, again, working with the community and saying, what is it that you would like to see in this space? For this particular one, we created a really active and passive space, and it could kind of be flexible depending on the use and what the community would like to see. We addressed the street changes by taking away some right-hand turns here on either side. When we started, we were a little guerrilla. We were working to demonstrate the changes that needed to be made, but we weren't necessarily working very closely with city staff. Now we work very closely with city staff. And every step of the way, we're kind of walking alongside them, and we're identifying some of the barriers that are in the way and some of the things that are holding communities back from being able to do an approach like this. Also, with our process, it's 120 days, so it's very fast. And we do that because we don't want people to overthink, and we don't want people to overmeet, because that analysis paralysis tends to slow people down and keeps them from being able to pull off the projects that they would like to see and have the changes they would like to see in the space. This plaza was installed in November of 2019. Obviously, we know COVID hit in March of 2020. So it went from being this really active space with a lot of programming to really passive space, where it was more about resources, sharing information about COVID, doing testing, things like that. So it took on a totally different life than we anticipated, but it ended up being what the community needed in that time. Also, it was installed in November of 2019, so we're going on right on 2 years of it being in place. There has not been a single violent crime incident in this plaza since its installation. But the reason that we were so excited to talk with KWMC is because of their work in digital fabrication and how they use digital fabrication as a tool to give to communities to change their spaces. So a couple years ago, we launched an online library of street furniture designs that anyone, anywhere can download for free. You cut them out using a CNC router, which I always say is like a giant printer for wood. And then you can build these pieces without any glue, screws, or nails. So it allows community members to work together and to design together, and then put these elements out on the sidewalk or the streets or wherever they may need them to make the spaces a little bit better. And it also helped us raise the design aesthetic because the way it started with tactical urbanism, it was very much about finding palettes and kind of rethinking the use of palettes and elements like that. I have a journalism degree. I cannot make a palette look good to save my life. But with Wikiblock, I can work alongside my community members, and we can build something that will be impactful and will last for a little while. It won't last forever, but it'll last for a while, and can change the landscape of the space. Plus, we get to do some really weird things. For this case, we worked with the Wisconsin, which is really known for their cheese. They wanted to create the world's largest cheese board, and they wanted it to be in a conference room that had some specific dimensions to it and measurements, and they wanted it to be in a barn. And we only had a few hours to build it. So they asked if that was something we could help with. And so we created kind of this shell of a barn, and this is what it turned into. And it is a Guinness World Record holder for being the world's largest cheese board. We also do things like geodesic domes and stages, and just kind of push what it is that we're thinking we're capable of doing and what the community thinks they're capable of doing to really take it all to the next level. This is another example of a project where it was kind of one part safety and focus, but also looking at how can we truly impact a community. And in this case, the community told us they wanted healthy sit-down options and just food options. This is considered a bad part of town. And people told us that no one would come here for a food park and that it just wouldn't work. This is kind of what the lot looks like. So with our work, and because of the work that we do with digital fabrication, we're not only looking at the 2D, we're also being able to look at the 3D, which helps in the transformation of spaces from, really vacant, empty lots into something like this. This food park was up for 30 days, but the food part of it was up for 8 days, just on the weekends. And we had more than 5,500 people coming to the bad part of town, spending money, engaging with the community, and proving that concepts like this could work with this community. This is one of our more recent projects. Again, we're kind of looking at the street, but we're also wanting to see the businesses along the edges and how do they engage with spaces and what concepts do they want to see in their spaces. All of the businesses here are super engaged, and the main activity in this city is happening just a couple blocks away. So they're wanting to bring a little activity here. And this is what we ended up creating with them, kind of taking the center lane and rethinking its purpose and reorienting that from the car to the person. Technically, there is enough drive lane on either side to keep this open if they wanted to do something like this. And this shows you how quickly these transformations happen. Obviously, the planning takes a couple months beforehand, though when we're on the ground, because of the community, we are able to make a pretty drastic change in the matter of just a few hours and a few days. One way we do that is we're working with their local resources. So in this particular community, they have a lot of apple orchards. So we worked with their apple bins and turned those into a stage and into planters. And then the school had a CNC router. They had actually had it for a year and a half, and they had never used it. So we sent them some of our Wikiblock files and said, "Hey, start working on these things. Let's see what we can do." And they cut out all of the Wikiblock elements. Again, these are made of plywood, so they're not going to last forever, but they will last, depending on how they're treated, for a few months, maybe even a year or so. And the community has continued to reuse this space and rethink what this space could be over the past few months. So a lot of times we're talking about, why do we do temporary? What is the point of doing demonstrations? We do see long-term impact from the projects that we're working on. A big part of what we're doing is community engagement. A lot of times people just don't feel like they have the permission to be able to move forward with something like this. And so, a lot of it is really just saying, do it. You can make it happen, and this is in your control. We do see street changes happening after a project. Usually that takes quite a bit of time, but in more than half of our projects, we see that those changes go forward. We see a lot of programming kind of continue on. Positive perception changes are a big part of what we're working on, as well as increasing the street life and then the community partnerships. But we also sometimes tell people that when we're doing our work, we sometimes build for Instagram. We want people to show off their spaces. We want them to invite others to come see their spaces. We believe everyone deserves a beautiful space that they can call their own, and that is a true reflection of who they are and of their communities. And so if they're tagging it on Instagram and showing it off on Instagram, then that is kind of proving that some of the elements have worked. And then we always tell people that we build for love and not for fear. So often with our work, people will ask us, well, what happens when someone comes and vandalizes something? Or what if a piece of furniture walks away? We always tell people that we're going to build for the community who's there and not all the what ifs that we come up with. And I will tell you that in 95% of our projects, that absolutely works out. People will show love to spaces that show love back. And that is ultimately what we're trying to create with communities. And that is it.
Oh, thanks, Krista. So inspiring. So yeah, as you can see there from hearing a little bit about both organizations, there's really some parallels and connections in what we're trying to do, but also some real differences in our context, which makes it really exciting to have this exchange. So just to share a little bit about what we've done so far together, a few weeks ago, we held a Zoom gathering, which around 40 people joined, including local people from Knowle West, some of whom are actually here and saying hi in the chat at the moment, and teams at Knowle Media Centre and Better Block, and members of the placemaking community across the US. We held this session as a space to inspire and also begin to exchange and learn from each other. And we actually invited an illustrator, the brilliant Jazz Thompson, who's based in Bristol, to capture some of the meeting. Chris, maybe you could share a screen and we can have a look at some of those. So yeah, at the session, we found out about each other, and we actually explored three sort of main topics which had come out as particular shared interests in breakout rooms and using a Miro board. We explored, and these ideas and topics had come out from conversations between Better Block and Media Centre in smaller groups first. So we explored the ideas around business models, like how do you make these projects sustainable, how do you develop partnerships, and thinking also about design rights when you're co-creating. We thought about durability, how to make these things last outdoors, and safety and permissions, temporary versus permanent. And then we also thought a bit about the design. So a chance to learn more about the We Can Make design codes and the Better Blocks wiki block. And also to think about how you can demark spaces and create boundaries, both through physical structures and painted murals. So we don't have to, yeah, it's brilliant. The illustrations, which we can kind of share around afterwards and make public, they have lovely little kind of quotes there and little aspects that came up from the conversations. We don't have time to explain everything that we talked about, but we thought we could share the screen, show you a little bit of the mirror board, and share some takeaways. So I'll just share the screen and then hand over to Krista to share a few takeaways. There we go. So this was one of the areas that we discussed. So I don't know if Krista, you want to say any takeaways from the group that you were in?
Yeah, I can't see your screen, but maybe others can.
Okay, I keep going. Let me see. Here we go. Great.
Got it. There we go.
Cool.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we got to kind of divide and conquer in our discussions about what everybody was thinking about. And along with a couple Better Block folks, we had some folks from Placemaking US join as well. So we have people from all around the US kind of being a part of this conversation who are in different fields. So one thing we discussed was building in subtle conflict. And as Chris mentioned earlier, just this idea of failure is okay and incredibly valuable. And so just kind of building in these moments with some of the designs and some of the approaches so that people can learn from that failure and from having to kind of figure it out. With our wiki block furniture, we try to make it as simple as possible. We always say it's like IKEA, but easier. And so someone had mentioned the subtle conflict, building that in, and we thought that was kind of a really interesting approach and maybe something that we kind of start exploring with some of our future projects as we talk about team building. Let's see, we also talked about what happens next. And we just started kind of dipping into this when our time ran out because we never have enough time. But we started discussing that transition from temporary to permanent and what does it take for that to be a success. And we discussed how you have to have community ownership and management. But a big thing, especially here that we're seeing, is the landowners and the property owners and the role that they play in some of that work and how you can sometimes have to shame them into doing the right thing. And then also talking about city staff partnerships and what that looks like. And then a third takeaway was kind of where we ended, and definitely one thing that we would want to discuss more is the conversation about funding, which is, you know, the number one question we always get and the number one question we always ask. So one comment that was made was that here, we actually find it kind of tricky to find funding for pilots because a lot of people want to put their names on things and they want them to last forever. So we're constantly having to prove the value of demonstrations and how that can turn into the permanent changes. But someone there mentioned that the opposite was true and that it was a little easier to find funding for pilots than it is to find funding for more permanent things. So definitely conversations that we want to continue and look forward to continuing on. Chris, do you want to touch on some of your takeaways?
Yeah, sure. So I really enjoyed the session. We were in the sort of durability and permissions chat. And one interesting point in our discussion was how materials or components could be hacked and used in a different way to what was intended. So the example given was using metal posts from chain link fencing, which is cheap and very readily available in the US, and using that as a structural element for installations or for street furniture. So instead of paying a lot of money for a steel post that is marketed as a post to hold something up, we'll use something else instead that maybe isn't intended for that. But if it does the job, obviously with all safety considerations considered, then there's no reason you have to stick to what it says on the label, basically. And I really, that resonated with me, and it's something that here we sort of try and do quite a lot, is look how we can do things differently, even given the same sort of tools or materials. And one other thing that I really liked, that actually wasn't from my breakout room necessarily, but from sort of the final wrap up and final thoughts of people, which is around honesty, and particularly honesty in dialogue about how long things will last, what maintenance is going to be required in order to keep things serviceable or looking to their best, and that it is very, very rare, if not impossible, that something lasts forever, particularly when in the context of CNC fabricated things with natural materials, with sustainability. There is a price, and not just a financial price, but sometimes the duration that something will last. So yeah, that honesty thing was something that stayed with me, and I really, really liked. Need to make sure to work that into future sort of projects or bids, is being honest about the realism of what happens in 2 to 10 years down the line.
That's great. I'm going to stop sharing there. Yes, also there's a group that also looked at sort of design and the idea of creating boundaries as well, and some interesting things came up there around how boundaries can often kind of hold sort of negative connotations, but thinking around how boundaries can also make people safe and inform how a space is meant to function, and looking back there again at the really inspiring ways that Better Block creates spaces using color and murals on the walls and the floor. We gathered some comments from people who came along to the session, and just wanted to kind of read a few out, really, just to hear those voices who are not with us in the meeting today. So John, who is one of the first Knowle West residents who is having a We Can Make Home built right now, said, I really enjoyed collaborating with Better Block online. It just goes to show how strong and widespread people power can be. It's pleasing to see how our end goals are the same: good quality, affordable housing or infrastructure by the community for the community. And a comment from an Knowle West Media Centre team member, Geeta, says, I was really inspired by Better Block's proactive, bottom-up and challenging energy. Rather than wait for the city to change ordinances that block change, they went ahead and built a pop-up amongst abandoned buildings to demonstrate to city authorities what is possible, which encouraged the city authorities to change city ordinances. Love it. And then someone else says that, I loved the session, mostly due to being connected with such like-minded people that I would have never had the opportunity to hear from otherwise. It's so reassuring to hear that other people are doing good in the world in similar ways. It's really validating and makes me feel really positive and excited for future connections. And someone else says, it matters how we live and work together. Better Block complements the We Can Make vision. We too strive to achieve outcomes that reshape environments and affect change. Everyone does deserve to feel safe and proud of their neighbourhood, and co-creative change is necessary to achieving this. Together we can create a more vibrant communities. And finally, overall, people were just so inspired of the idea of building for love and not fear. The joy in doing has really stuck with people, and also, the power of just doing it. The fact that it's all in the making, and through trial and error and experimenting, we can make change. So that's just some inspirational takeaways. So that leads us on to what might we do next. So these initial conversations have sort of planted really exciting seeds. I don't know if, Krista, you wanted to share maybe some of the ideas about what we might do next together.
Yeah, so I think a really natural way for us all to continue working together and exchanging ideas is to create something on Wikiblock to add to the library. In our discussions, we were talking about some of the challenges that we all face and some of the ways in which design can affect some of that. And we discussed a kiosk possibly for a market, something that's really easy for people to set up. And, if you're just one person going out, something that will fit, be easy to unfold and set up. We could brainstorm on an idea together and add it to our Wikiblock library and create, a special line kind of along those ways. So I see, some collaboration in that way and discussing further. I also very selfishly just want to better understand some of the policies and ordinances there and see how, how alike those are or how different they are in the work that we're doing. We're expanding next year and doing some projects in some other places. One project is in Dublin, and so we're kind of looking at how things look there. Already we understand the streets are going to be different because the priority of the streets was more on people. So we're excited to see kind of how this approach can work in other places. So I think there's a lot more to continue discussing, but I also think beyond the discussions, we can start designing and put some real things out there that other people can download and then design as well.
So exciting. Yeah. Chris, did you want to share?
Well, all of that. I want to do all of that. Absolutely. And particularly see the help that can go both ways. So we can make is looking at this kit of parts it's referring to for all the other stuff other than the home that goes into the gardens and into furniture. And so the crossover there with Better Block just makes, or with Wikiblock, sorry, just makes so much sense. So we'd love to feed into that and work on something collaboratively. But then within the sort of local neighbourhood, we've got the Knowle West Philwood Broadway working group. So this is an area of Knowle West that I think was probably shown on one of Martha's slides at the start. And some of this working group came to the meeting, the collaborative meeting that we had, and they would love to invite their whole group to meet and to be inspired by Better Block and discuss how they could connect with Better Block and with the media centre more, with plans and ideas to improve the Broadway, maybe again developing, as a sort of street takeover style, like you've shown some amazing examples of what you've done there, or with the Philwood market that happens. So does a pop-up market stall, that hits a couple of points there as well. So a lot of energy and a lot of interest for what we could do there within a very specific geographical area of Knowle West.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and we actually, I think I can see that Michaela is here in the chat, and she's actually part of that Philwood Broadway working group. So I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have as well, Michaela, live while you're there with us. And somebody also I was speaking to earlier was saying that they got so many ideas. They were like, oh, could we pop up seating area, benches on the green? They even said, I'm not even sure what this really is. They said, is a somatic storytelling pod that converts into a performance stage too much? So people are full of ideas. Another thing that we also talked about was how to really get the buy-in from like local councillors and local government, and how to really kind of inspire those people and also developers, like who's going to advocate and kind of fund and invest in this. And we were thinking that could be another really interesting call to see between our different contexts, how these kind of how these things work really. So we've got quite a few ideas, but we're really excited and so grateful for this opportunity. This feels like an amazing seed that wouldn't have been able to happen without co-creating change opportunities. So we're really really grateful for that. I guess we have some time now for if there are any questions. What Michaela says, it's just really exciting. Can't wait to see what we can make happen. So that's really nice. Do we have any questions? I can't see any in the chat. I wonder if anyone, and I can see Jason is in the chat. Do you have any questions? Hugely fascinating projects. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Jason. Excited by tactical urbanism. Yeah. I was wondering, Krista, if you could say a bit more about this placemaking network. I was really excited when, like, on the call, like, so many people came from, like, how did that kind of come about? Or yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
I hope I do it justice. So it was started by Ethan Kent, who was part of Project for Public Spaces, and they have several networks around the country and or around the world. And so the Placemaking US group started, I think, in 2019, so it's newer, but there are some that have been around quite a bit longer and are a bit more established, and they're all under Placemaking X as well. So you can definitely find them on Twitter and different places, and get engaged with that network. I loved how many folks we had joining us on the call and kind of bringing their different perspectives. So it's a good group of like-minded people who are working to make some changes and learn from one another, which is always, and also sometimes we just kind of commiserate with one another too.
Yeah. It's so important to have those spaces, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe if we don't have any questions, then maybe we just finish a few minutes early, unless we have any other things we want to share. I don't know.
I say we give a few minutes back to everyone's day, but thank you all. Thank you, Co-Creating Change, for giving us this opportunity. Martha, Chris, thanks for reaching out to us. It's been a lot of fun here, and we're all kind of re-energized and excited to see what we can all do together. So appreciate the opportunity. Definitely want to keep all the conversations, keep them all going. You can find us at betterblock.org. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So you can find us on all those channels as well. We don't do any dancing on TikTok, don't worry. That is not
That's great. Thanks, everyone.